You know that moment when you're about to say something and then you pause. Not because you don't know what to say, but because somewhere in your mind, a quiet calculation is happening. How will this sound? Will they think it's weird? Too much? Not enough? So you adjust. You soften your tone. You change a word. Sometimes you don't say it at all. And to everyone else, it looks like you're just thoughtful, careful, easy to get along with. But inside, it feels like you're constantly editing yourself in real time. Most people don't notice this kind of effort, and when they do, they tend to misunderstand it. They call it overthinking or insecurity, or say things like, "Why do you care so much what others think?" As if it's a simple switch you could just turn off. But what often gets missed is that this isn't just a habit, it's a pattern. And for people who care deeply about how they're perceived, there's usually more going on beneath the surface than anyone realizes. Because this tendency, this constant awareness of other people's reactions, it didn't appear out of nowhere. It was learned. And in many cases, it was necessary. There's a concept in psychology that doesn't get talked about much outside of clinical spaces. It's the idea that the brain, especially in early development, becomes highly attuned to social cues when the environment feels unpredictable. Not necessarily dangerous in an obvious way, but inconsistent. Sometimes warmth is there, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes approval comes easily, other times it's withdrawn without explanation. For a child, that kind of environment creates a very specific kind of learning. You start to scan, tone of voice, facial expressions, silences. You notice small shifts most people would miss because those shifts used to mean something. Whether it was safety or tension, connection or distance. Over time, your brain gets very good at predicting reactions. And that ability stays with you. Neuroscience would describe this as heightened sensitivity in systems related to social evaluation and emotional processing. But in real life, it just feels like awareness. Like you're always a little more tuned in than everyone else. A little more careful. A little more responsible for how things go. And that's where something important often gets misunderstood. Because from the outside, it can look like you care too much what others think. But from the inside, it doesn't feel like caring too much. It feels like maintaining connection, avoiding friction, keeping things stable. And that shift in perspective matters. Because it means this behavior isn't a flaw. It's an adaptation. At some point, being aware of others' perceptions helped you navigate your world more smoothly. It reduced conflict. It preserved relationships. It kept things from becoming overwhelming. So your system held on to it, not because it's ideal, but because it worked. And to be clear, this isn't better or worse than any other way of being. Some people grow up in environments where self-expression is encouraged without consequence, and they move through the world with a different kind of ease. Others learn to prioritize harmony, awareness, and emotional attunement. Neither is more correct. They're just different responses to different experiences. But here's where it becomes more complex. Because the same ability that helps you read a room can also make it harder to feel like you fully belong in it. When you're constantly adjusting yourself based on how others might react, there's a subtle distance that forms. Not dramatic, not obvious, just enough that you're never completely unfiltered. And over time, that can lead to a quiet kind of question. If I stopped adjusting, would people still respond the same way? It's not always a conscious thought. Sometimes it just shows up as hesitation or second guessing, or that familiar pause before speaking. There's a paradox here. The more skilled you become at maintaining connection through awareness, the easier it is to lose track of what you would have done without that awareness.
And yet, that same sensitivity holds something else too. It holds empathy, the ability to notice what others are feeling, even when they don't say it directly. The ability to make people feel comfortable, understood, considered. These aren't small things. They shape relationships in ways that often go unspoken. So, this pattern, this tendency to care deeply about how you're perceived, it comes with both a cost and a strength. The cost is the constant self monitoring, the quiet pressure to get it right, the feeling of being slightly on guard, even in ordinary moments. But the strength is in the awareness, the emotional intelligence, the capacity to create ease in spaces where others might not even notice tension. And neither side cancels out the other. They coexist, which is why trying to force yourself into not caring at all rarely works, because it's not just a behavior you can drop. It's part of how your system learned to relate to the world. And systems don't change through pressure, they change through understanding, through noticing without judgment when that internal editing process starts, through recognizing that the impulse to adjust is coming from a place that once made a lot of sense, and maybe still does in certain situations, but not all of them. There's nothing broken about you for feeling this way, nothing excessive about being aware of how you're perceived. It simply means your mind learned early on that connection mattered, and that paying attention was one way to protect it. And that kind of learning doesn't disappear. It just becomes something you can start to see more clearly. And when you see it clearly, something shifts. Not all at once, but enough that the pause before speaking feels a little different, less like hesitation, more like choice. And if this feels familiar, there's probably more to this pattern than just this one piece. More ways it shows up, more layers to how it formed, and more understanding that tends to change how you see yourself in ways you didn't expect.